Well, thank you. Thank you, Alyssa. It's good to be here on unceded Musqueam territory on Coast Salish lands. And it's good to be here at UBC, also learning from everyone here, from your experience with heritage technologies. And thanks also to the organizers of the panel for inviting me here today. So today I want to talk about my ongoing work with the McLeod Lake Sekani Band. They're Athabascan people in Treaty 8 territory in northeastern British Columbia, interior of British Columbia, to develop a community archive to house their digital heritage collections and to link these to a development referral, a land governance tracking system, so that the band can better uphold their Aboriginal and treaty rights. And I'll share my experience with testing out or demoing a number of the rapidly evolving digital heritage curation tools and technologies that are out there. And I will be, as you know, my work with archive management and digital preservation and community engagement dates back to 2003. So a lot of technological changes have happened over that time, and the process of working with the communities has been almost as important, probably more important than the actual product sometimes, especially for the community, articulating those rights and interests in types of cultural property, whether it's group heritage or individual heritage or kin-based heritage. So this project began in 2012 as part of a traditional land use study that I did with McLeod Lake to assess potential impacts on heritage, intangible and material heritage resources from the construction of the Site C Dam. Oh, thank you. Oh. There we go. And I want to thank my collaborators on all this work. Deborah Prince and Mark Diffin, they're the land referral managers at McLeod Lake. Deborah Prince started the work and Mark Diffin is continuing it. Darius Gillis, who is their GIS technician, the McLeod Lake community. Jody Perkins, who is an adjunct with SLACE and a MLS consultant. And Michael Ashley also, who helped us with a pilot project with the Mukatu CMS. So as part of the TLU study that I did for the Site C Dam, we designed into the budget, we built digital archiving for existing archival sources and previous TLU studies and the newly video recorded oral history interviews. We built all this into the study. Budget. As McLeod Lake, like most other First Nations in Canada, don't have a library or archiving system in place. So this was one opportunity to get funding to start an archive. So as a pilot project, we decided to try out the Mukatu content management system, which was then at version 1.5, being developed by anthropologist Kim Kristen Whitley. And we were excited about its design, incorporating features to assign cultural protocols to heritage materials and to add traditional knowledge, traditional customs for access, care, transmission, that type of thing. So we began the Sekani Community Archive using the Mukatu platform as part of the TLUS, and we started entering data that we had collected from previous TLU studies as well as from our own, and began to share materials with the community members to get their feedback of of the system. They loved having their heritage so easily accessible and began to think of using the archive to document much more, like traditional language, their genealogies, and to map traditional activities like hunting, fishing, camping, praying on the land. This is an example of an already public record, so I'm able to show it to you from the BC archives that we incorporated into the site. So as we began to enter data, we found that some features of the CMS worked well for us, while others didn't. I, as a sort of the archivist and liking to have context with digital material, liked the standard Dublin Core metadata that they incorporated that gives each piece of material a context. And the community members really loved the traditional knowledge category where they could add information to the standard records. But we began, however, as we began to define communities, different access groups to their cultural protocols, we realized that the cultural protocols didn't work well for Sekani peoples, who are non-stratified, bilateral hunting people. They privilege individual knowledge and individual relationships with heritage materials over any kin-based or gender-based rights to access to materials or to use materials. You'll see here it became, as we started to define communities or user groups, the only way to do it was to add every individual as a user group, and we stopped at about 50 user group individuals because we realized it wasn't, that was sort of it just wasn't going to work for us because there's no point in tagging everything if the protocol basically is you have to deal with everything on an individual basis anyways. There's no shortcut to protocols, basically. But we did, working with the system really helped us think about some of the types they might like to restrict access. So we came up, you probably can't see this here, but we came up with different categories of cultural heritage, open community access. Cultural heritage restricted access to protect an individual's personal medicine power. Cultural heritage restricted access to protect a dreamer's power. Cultural heritage restricted access because of confirmed legal privilege. Cultural heritage restricted access because of possible legal privilege. And cultural heritage restricted access needs further consultation. So those were sort of some of the ways that the community wanted to sort through the material. Also we realized that at the time the system was a little more beta than we had expected it to be. Video was only accessible through third parties like YouTube or Vimeo. It had limited geospatial mapping features, which was something that the community really wanted to be able to have at that time. There was, those were the sort of the main issues. Oops. So using the Mukutu CMS made me realize that it, like the Reciprocal Research Network, the RRN, which Dave described earlier, was developed in collaboration with First Nations as a virtual repatriation tool to provide Indigenous First Nations groups with access to their heritage materials that are housed by and owned by outside institutions such as museums and archives. And what we actually, so here's I won't dwell on these details, those details. So we began to look for open source land referral tracking systems that have emerged to help deal with government mandated heritage consultation through environmental impact assessments mostly. I found that they seem to serve the needs of developers to provide an automated workflow for timely review of development plans, and they also help the First Nation with that workflow. But many are have built-in direct to digital mapping capabilities also, streamlining consultation processes for mapping. But most of them had limited archival setups. So a lot of them really didn't have standardized metadata when we first began reviewing them. But that seemed to change. We started this in 2020. Well, by the time we were looking at this, it was probably 2014. But just in the last 2 years, I'm down to 5 minutes, it's really changed. So I'm going to just show you the top group. That was Trivian Labs. They have no archiving tool, but excellent geospatial integration. Dolo Connect, which Dave Sheppy talked about. All of these have excellent geospatial integration. Trailmark Systems. Again, this is developed as both a repository and a tracking system. Well, they're starting to develop it into a tracking system. Then the Community Knowledge Keeper is another one. Lewis Toolkit, which is based on biography mapping sort of standards and methodologies from Terry Tobias. And Signals for First Nations Governance. We tried out all of those systems. I'm going to just go back here, and the ones on the top are all custom-built, custom-designed systems, and the ones on the bottom here are mostly Drupal-based, sort of customizing already boxed CMSs, because of some of our experiences with Mukatu, we started realizing we thought we wanted maybe a more custom designed design system. Let me just go here. And so the process of trying out all of these systems and seeing demos help clarify the needs of McLeod Lake and other related Daneza groups who share a similar social structure and needs. So they felt that they needed their own heritage preservation system with Indigenous-centered systems to help them with heritage vitalization. This is a 5-year plan that we're just starting to work on towards sustainable First Nations digital curation. And the idea is that you have a secure database, meaning encrypted, backed up, good infrastructure. You have existing collections that you put into the database. You have potential collections that you can put in. The potential ones, so the existing ones we knew about were existing TLUS data, oral histories, map data, secondary language materials that have been collected over decades, existing GIS data, membership data also, so that with people you can the idea with the membership data is that it would potentially work into genealogies also. So whenever someone's name is mentioned, you can use it as a part of a search feature also and then integrate it into genealogy database. Eventually archival heritage data, community documents from the community. And so all of these would be fed into the land and cultural resource management system. And with an automated land referral tracking system that has the built-in report building. This is the first piece we're working on. Sort of that plus starting to upload backlogs of traditional land use data that already exists in digital format. Monitoring programs is another big thing that they wanted to be able to manage, access, automate the processes for getting information out. They do a lot of collecting, but then they haven't been able to do anything with what they collect because it's not in a system anywhere. And then with this whole process, we were the idea is this is a closed system, not an open system, and we'll build in processes for further defining and refining community-defined rights to control and access the heritage materials. So very few people would have access at the beginning. It would probably be the land referral manager, the people directly working with the materials. I'll just say also, McLeod Laker Treaty 8, they joined Treaty 8 in I think it was year 2000. And so they chose that as opposed to going the treaty process, doing signing a new treaty with the government. They should have probably been on Treaty 8. They were just out hunting when the treaty commissioners came through. So really it sort of made sense for them to be included in Treaty 8. And they felt it was the fastest way for them to start asserting their own rights to their heritage materials. Challenges. Biggest challenge, lack of core funding for Indigenous groups, infrastructure and staffing. So far we're funding it through development, but you're funding it through development to try and preserve your lands, but if you get it funded by development, they wreck your lands. It's sort of it's a catch-22, right? So if people have ideas about how to lobby for core funding to be for every First Nation, my perspective is every First Nation in Canada, as part of their core funding from the government, should have a heritage archive or information specialist that can help with this information. Then the other challenges, current limited capacity of band members to manage the CMS, but then of course opportunities for training and skill development like you're showing us today, everyone here is. One of the biggest ones, well, archives often trigger painful memories. So being sensitive to that and knowing how to deal with that when it comes. And standardizations also for CMS software is another big issue. So in terms of where we go from here, I think there's lots of opportunities with the government supporting the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights with the recent Silcotain-William decision, to lobby for some of these changes to infrastructure and funding to stop the slow violence that is often incorporated into heritage management practices, whether it's just sort of embedded in some ways, in that funding goes to outside institutions usually, it's very hard for a First Nation to get funding themselves to do this type of work. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time and for sharing everything, all their information today, and we'll be incorporating ideas from everyone as we go forward with this.